Social emotional learning is something that has been at the forefront of a lot of discussions about changes in the secondary level as a result of the pandemic and the fact that students are coming to us without those interpersonal relationship skills. So I thought it might be important that I talk about and address why social emotional learning is so important in our current school climate. So, what is social emotional learning? Well, it has 5 competencies: self awareness, self management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. I'm going to quickly tell you what the definitions of each of those are because I'll be referencing these competencies throughout. So, self awareness is the ability to understand one's own emotions, thoughts, values, and how they influence behavior across contexts. In regards to self-management, this is the ability to manage one's own emotions, thoughts, and behaviors effectively in different situations to achieve goals and aspirations. Social awareness, the ability to understand the perspectives of and empathize with others, including those from diverse backgrounds, cultures, and contexts. Relationship skills are the ability to establish and maintain healthy and supportive relationships and to effectively navigate settings with diverse individuals and groups. And lastly, responsible decision making, the ability to make caring and constructive choices about personal behavior and social interactions across diverse situations. All of those definitions in more depth can be found at the website below. So, why is social emotional learning needed? Well, if implemented correctly, social emotional learning, SEL as it'll be referred to, can be used to help fill in the gaps in social and emotional intelligence that students are lacking as a lingering effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, what does the research say about social emotional learning? Below, you'll see 3 of the studies that I looked at in depth that I found had good information. On the next slide, I'm going to dive into each of these, dedicating a whole slide to each, kind of giving you an overview and the findings that were in each of these. So the first one, the social emotional learning approach on students' social emotional competencies. So this was a study of 207 students, with 117 being in the experiment group and 90 in the control. And what they had was a pre and post assessment of the social emotional competency questionnaire. These students were then either put in a group where they had a SEL curriculum and they were led through lessons and other things to help them improve on their competencies, the 5 listed above, or they were put in the control group where they were given a pseudo curriculum but actually was not tied to these competencies. And what they found as a result of this study is that as the improvement in the competencies went up, there was an improvement in positive behaviors such as positive student relationships and a decrease in negative social relationship things such as bullying. This led to an increase in students' achievement when there was an increase in their competencies. The next study, you can see the title at the top, looked at many different implementations and the effects that those implementations had at different levels. One particular study they looked at was 4 high schools, 2 that were high performing and 2 that were low performing. And in the high performing schools, SEL was a big part of the curriculum. And it was wrapped around the idea that mental health, being able to regulate our emotions, has a big impact on our abilities to perform academically. In the low performing schools, there was almost no SEL curriculum. And as a result, students weren't quite as effective at managing their emotions. And thus, there was a link to the lower achievement. Now, as stated above, from this study, as social emotional behaviors improve, academic achievement improves. And what that means for us at the secondary level is that we need to be teaching these soft skills. We need to be teaching students how to be effective in regulating their emotions. And that will lead to the achievement that we're lacking right now. Now, only 18 states actually require social emotional curriculum at the secondary level. With the results that this author found in his studies, he pushed for us to encourage there to be more curriculum for SEL at the secondary level. Now, this last one was a giant study done in Northwest England, over 1,600 students. Now, how this one worked is they had the students assess their 5 competencies through a self-rating. They then tied these self-ratings to the academic success these students were having as measured by the Stage 2 National Curriculum Test, which is essentially a test that students take in England throughout their schooling. There's 3 stages to kind of determine where they fall and what possible future vocations might be good for them. And what they found was that there is a very, very strong correlation between high competency scores and high academic scores on this Stage 2 test. And they found that as these students progressed, those that had SEL in their schools, their competencies increased, as did their academics. And those that did not have the SEL curriculums saw stagnation or in some cases regression in their academic scores. So the implications for this, I think, are quite clear. If we want to improve academic scores, we need to be teaching the social emotional skills these students need to achieve these things. Now, how do we implement this in the classroom? Well, there's 3 main parts to an effective social emotional learning lesson. And they're the initial instruction. And these are activities that we need to select that best match the needs and interests of our students to meet the identified goals of instruction. Now, this is followed then by guiding them through collaborative learning. And in this stage of lessons, we're trying to engage the students with their peers and explore the concept from different perspectives and get to a deeper level through a non-judgmental environment. And then finally, we need then to let them have independent practice with feedback. We need to see, has the interactions with their peers deepened their understanding of the content? And if it hasn't, then we need to go back to step 1 or possibly even step 2 to see where that has failed. Now, for the most part, any classroom that uses collaborative learning probably is implementing some level of social emotional learning. But this book that I encourage you to get has 75 strategies to foster these. Now, I don't have time to go in depth with them. Just know that everything is based around these 3 concepts: initial instructions, guided collaborative learning, and independent practice with feedback. If you can start implementing those into your classroom, students start taking ownership of their learning, their mental health improves, and as we saw from those studies, as our mental health improves, as our competency improves, our academic success improves. Now, there are some criticisms of social emotional learning listed here, and they're valid, and there is some credit to these things. I didn't spend too much time diving in to the research behind this, but I wanted to see what are some major criticisms of social emotional learning and address them. So, as we talked about, as students' competencies increase, their academic success increases. So yes, it does take resources potentially away from some things, but ultimately, the investment in social emotional learning is gained back tenfold. Now, it is difficult to measure impact. A lot of the studies that I quoted were self-rated. And I think some people are very bad judges of themselves. They don't have a lot of introspection. So that's a valid criticism. Now, I think tying it to that academic and finding the correlation there is a way that we could measure the impact that this is having. Now, again, the focus on academic skills. Social emotional learning is academic skills. Students that are mentally not engaged cannot learn. The research is clear on that. So teaching them how to engage with their emotions and mentally increases their success. This victim mentality, however, I don't buy into. Being aware of how you feel doesn't make you feel more or less like a victim. So that's all I really want to say on that one. Very interesting argument against social emotional learning that I just think is bogus. So, conclusion. It's very important, especially in our current climate where these students have come to us and they don't know how to interact and engage in positive ways with their peers. The findings from the research are clear. Social emotional learning can help benefit the academic success that we're trying to achieve. Additionally, most of us are already doing some of these things. But I think if we're aware of the strategies that we're using in our classroom and we push it further and we look at the research and we have backings, like those examples that are found in that textbook that you can find in one of the slides, I think our students gain a lot from that. And finally, the criticisms, while valid, at times, some of them, I don't think really get at the heart of what the effective implementation of social emotional learning really is. I think if you think of social emotional learning as just being aware of students' feelings, yes, that's not going to achieve the results we're looking for. And that's just going to give credence to these arguments. However, if we look at social emotional learning instead as teaching students how to manage their emotions, how to be in touch with how they're feeling, that's when we start seeing the real payoff in their academic success. So I would encourage you to look into social emotional learning, how you can implement it into your classroom, and make pushes for your district to implement these things. This last slide is my sources. Thank you very much for looking at this presentation, looking through it. I would love to have your feedback, and please take the time to consider a social emotional learning.